Hey guys, how's it going? It's Okami Astra, and today we're going to be talking about Chi-Yu EX. As of the recording, it is June 8th, which means that Pokemon TCG Live is officially out of beta. And with that comes the new Pokemon set Paldea Evolved. This is the second Scarlet and Violet set, which means that, of course, we have new EXs to play with. With all the hype around Shenpao EX, Wo-Chien EX, of course, those two EXs are very powerful, but there's not a lot of hype around Chi-Yu EX, and I just want to show you that it is a little viable, if not the most powerful deck in the format right now. But it is quite a fun deck if you can get it rolling a little bit. And later we'll be looking at some footage from a game that I played against Arcanine EX from Scarlet and Violet base. Yeah, let's just get into the deck build itself, and then I will post-commentate over that game shortly. So, let's talk about Chi-Yu EX. Chi-Yu EX is a fire type, and it has 190 HP, so it is a little frail, but it doesn't make it bad for setting up. So let's talk about its attacks. For 1 fire energy, Jealousy Singe will discard the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck, so you can mill the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck, but that's not the attack that we want to be focusing on, at least not with Chi-Yu EX anyway. For 2 energy, 2 fire energy, the second attack, Flame Surge, will do 100 damage, but more importantly, we can choose up to 3 of your benched Pokemon. And for each of those benched Pokemon, search your deck for basic fire energy and attach them to those 3 Pokemon, 1 on each. And then, of course, afterwards, you will shuffle your deck. So we're going to be using this Chi-Yu EX to set up things like our Heatran VMAX. So, luckily for us, Chi-Yu doesn't only have to attach to basic Pokemon, it can attach to evolved Pokemon, for instance, right? But let's go into the rest of our deck composition, starting with the Heatran VMAX that I mentioned earlier. So, we run a 2-2 Heatran VMAX line. The Heatran ends up pairing really well with this Oricorio, which will heal 20 damage off an Evolution Mon, which of course Heatran VMAX is, and when there's a Stadium in play, which we will get into a little bit later, the Heatran will run one of our Stadiums, right? The Heatran VMAX will be able to heal 50 damage, so that is around 70 damage worth of healing per turn, which does end up mattering against various matchups. So we do run a 2-2 Heatran VMAX line. This will be our main attacker. The attack on Heatran VMAX is the one that we'll talk about, but you can attack with Heatran V. It does 180 damage for the same amount of energy as the Heatran VMAX, but for a different condition, right? So if you have Stadium in play, it does 90 more damage to the 90 base, and the first attack, Heat Burn, does 30 damage, and your opponent is now burned. But we really want to be focusing on the Heatran VMAX's attack. So for 3 energy, 2 fire, 1 colorless, you can use Max Heat Burst, which does 180 damage and additionally burns your opponent's active. So during Pokemon Checkup, they'll take 2 damage counters, which effectively makes this attack a 200 damage attack. And then if the burn sticks around, it actually does 220 damage, because during the next Pokemon Checkup, if they don't flip a coin to get out of burn, then they will take an additional 20, so that is a total of 40 additional damage during both Pokemon Checkups, in between your turn transitioning to your opponent's turn, and then your opponent transitioning to your next turn. To help power up the Heatran VMAX, we're going to pair this with a 2-2 line of Charcadet and Armarouge. So in this deck, we have 2 evolution lines, which is, of course, why we want to go first with this list. The Armarouge here is really used for its ability Fire Off, so as often as you like during your turn, you may move a fire energy from one of your bench Pokemon to your active Pokemon. And this is really good because, of course, Chi-Yu is going to be spreading energies across 3 different Pokemon, assuming you have 3 different bench Pokemon, right? So when you have energies spread across those Mons, right, that means you can at least guarantee 2 energies to move onto Heatran VMAX, and then you might be able to get the attachment for turn. And if, of course, you have the stadium that I'm going to mention later, you can move an energy from the discard onto one of your bench Pokemon and then move it that way, using the Fire Off ability onto the Heatran VMAX. But this card ends up being extremely crucial in our game that I will be showing you later. It is a very, very good support Pokemon, and it will end up pairing really well with other Chi-Yu builds if people decide to go different routes with Chi-Yu, but I decided to go with the Heatran VMAX build. It's really neat, just a side tangent here, it's really neat to see like some of these less played cards like Heatran VMAX from Astral Radiance see a little bit more play now that some of these EXs allow these high energy count cards, or high energy count to attack Pokemon to actually be able to attack, because you know, we got support mons that can help with that. So with that being said, let's get into the trainers that will support all of these Pokemon. Of course, the stadium that we're going to be running is Magma Basin. We don't want Path because, of course, that shuts down our ability on the Radiant Charizard that I forgot to mention. So Radiant Charizard, great cleanup in the end game, but also because of the Fire Off from Armarouge, you can set up Radiant Charizard mid-game and still be able to get attacks off with the Radiant Charizard. Now, the reason why I say that, even though you usually would save Radiant Charizard for the end game, is because in my trainers, I run one Super Rod, which is a card that is returning from Pokemon Black and White. So we haven't seen this card since Black and White, but it is now here again in Paldea Evolved, replacing our beloved Ordinary Rod from the Sword and Shield era. So Super Rod can retrieve things like a Heatran V, the Oricorio, and of course the Radiant Charizard, so that you can recycle that Radiant Charizard later down the line. Now, I said that we want to start with Chi-Yu EX pretty much every single game, and if I didn't mention that, well, there we go. But we do want to start with the Chi-Yu EX pretty much every single game because you want to get that initial attachment for turn, and then on the following turn you attach again to do 100 damage, and then set up your bench. So to help find one of the 4 Chi-Yu EXs, I personally run 4 Nest Balls and 4 Battle VIP Passes. And I know that might seem like a lot, but this deck really, really relies on Chi-Yu EX to set up the rest of your fodder mons, and then have this Armarouge ready to move all these energies into the Pokemon that's going to be attacking. So that's why we run 4 Battle VIP Passes, 4 Nest Balls, and that will pretty much almost always let us find Chi-Yu turn 1. And then when we don't find the Chi-Yu turn 1, and if we start one of these other mons, we do run 4 switching options, 2 of those being Escape Rope, and 2 of those being just a regular switch. I run 2 Forest Seal Stones so that it helps us look for things that we need, so say we don't get the Chi-Yu off the rip, and I do happen to have Forest Seal Stone for whatever reason in my hand, right? I could find Battle VIP Pass, or I could find, you know, whatever card I need late game if I don't need it early game. So the Forest Seal Stone ends up being very, very clutch because it gives the Heatran VMAX a V-Star ability, even though it is a VMAX Pokemon with no V-Star ability. So this card ends up being very, very good. And I run 2 of them just in case you end up prizing one and you need it for a critical turn later in the game, which you will see that I wish I had the Forest Seal Stone in the game that I played, but it ended up not mattering because I got the card that I needed off the prizes. So let's talk about some of the other cards. We have 2 Ultra Balls, which seems a little low on Ultra Balls, but you should have like enough draw power with the 4 Professor's Researches to draw into the cards that you need, like the Armarouge, like the Heatran VMAX, like the Oricorio, and other things, and so on. Of course, with running a VMAX, if they do get a KO on the Heatran VMAX, you will want to Roxanne them, bring them down to 2 cards, and then hopefully that will stall them enough so that you can get set up on another attacker. I run 2 Boss's Orders, of course, just because you want to be able to control the board state a little bit, control what's in the active slot for your opponent, and then be able to take those critical knockouts at those critical times. 2 Iono. Iono is another new card from the Paldea Evolved set. It acts a little bit like Marnie and a little bit like N, if you remember N from back in the day. So what this card does is each player shuffles their hand and puts it to the bottom of their deck, and then each player will draw for as many cards as they have prize cards. So let's say your opponent has 2 prize cards left and you have 4 prize cards left, right? You can use Iono to shuffle your hand back to the bottom of your deck if your hand isn't that good, and then you can draw 4 off the top while your opponent only draws 2. This will end up being a very, very powerful comeback mechanic later down the road for decks that utilize this correctly. And then the last supporter that I purposely skipped over, just because I think this is the neatest part of this deck, is Cheryl. So, Cheryl will heal all damage from your evolution mons, and if I do, discard all the energies from the Pokemon that was healed in this way. So if you heal Pokemon that's evolved with Cheryl, you will have to discard all the energies. Now, let's go back to the Pokemon and talk about why this card is so interesting. Of course, we want to be using that card with Heatran VMAX. So Heatran VMAX has 330 HP, but it is a VMAX, so it will give away 3 prize cards if it goes down. But generally, Heatran VMAX should be able to take at least 1 hit, because hitting this 330 HP is, it takes a lot for decks to hit 330 HP. Now, of course, it's weak to water, so Xianpao can one-shot this with half the amount of energies that it would normally need to hit 330, but regardless, in most matchups, most decks can't really hit that 330 mark. It is very, very difficult, and it is a huge reach to try to hit 330 HP. Most decks can barely hit the 310 HP to knock out a Mew VMAX in the Mew VMAX matchup. So, Heatran being just slightly tankier with its healing abilities, pairing with the Oricorio and the Magma Gain with the Magma Basin, this makes this Heatran VMAX a little bit tougher to knock out. Now, the reason why we like the Cheryl, right, is because although Heatran has a 4 retreat cost, the Chi-Yu should set up the energy count in play to be able to retreat the Heatran VMAX onto the bench and switch to a different attacker like another Heatran or a mid to late game Radiant Charizard. You can attach return, and then you can use Magma Basin to throw energy or to throw energies onto the Armarouge later, or you could Cheryl after retreating the Heatran VMAX because it shouldn't have any energies on it, but because it doesn't have any energies on it, it won't cost energies to use Cheryl. So you can use Cheryl even if the Pokemon doesn't have any energies on it, and you'll see that later in the gameplay footage. And then once you're able to Magma Basin a couple energies into play, right, you can use Armarouge to move these energies back onto Heatran and then go back in for the swing. And with that being said, that should cover all of our supporters and trainers with Pokemon. And the last thing to cover is how many energies I run. So initially with this deck, I ran, I believe, 16 energies, but I found myself drawing into energies a little too much. So I dropped it to 14, which allowed me to add the Super Rod. I almost said Ordinary Rod. Rest in peace. But Super Rod gave me room to run another Nest Ball. But 14 energies does feel very, very good for this deck. Yeah, so this is the list. There's 14 Pokemon, and I believe it has 10 basics, so 4, 8, 9, 10 basics, and then your evolution mon. So you really shouldn't be mulliganing all that much, and you should have a very, very high chance of starting the Chi-Yu that we want to start with. So 14 Pokemon, 32 trainers, and 14 energies. Welp. I believe that pretty much covers the whole deck. Let's get straight into the gameplay, and I'll catch you in the post-commentary. So see you in a bit. Alright, let's get straight into the gameplay. I believe I do lose my coin flip here. We'll just have to wait and see. I did end up losing the coin flip, but in the end it doesn't matter. We'll see how I play out my first turn here in a second. My opponent really shouldn't be thinking for that long. If they ever have the option to go first, they really just should pick to go first. There's really no reason to go second nowadays, especially if your deck likes to evolve, like Arcanine EX does. Yep, we'll we'll skip through this a little bit here. There we go. So my initial hand is Oricorio, Research, Iono, 2 Magma Basin, and an Energy. Now, I do have a lot of lines that I could be taking. I could play the Magma Basin, I could attach an Energy on the Oricorio, which allows me to be able to switch, but what that also means is that I won't be able to attach Return onto a Chi-Yu if I do find the Chi-Yu. I could also Research, or I could Iono this turn, and using Iono early isn't really the best because it does let your opponent see 6 brand new cards, because Iono does shuffle the cards back to the bottom of the deck instead of shuffling all the cards back into the deck like Judge does. So Iono will allow both of us to see brand new cards off the top of the deck, which wouldn't be ideal. So I guess I believe the correct play was to Research. Not quite sure what I do here yet because I don't quite remember, but I guess we'll find out how past Astra did in this match. So let's see, the game has been set up. We see that it's Growlithe and Simisear V, which tells me that it is an Arcanine EX build of some kind. So let's see what my opponent does on their first turn. And they did end up choosing to go first, which they should, because you want to evolve that Growlithe into an Arcanine EX to make it harder to KO. Looks like they attach 1 energy onto Simisear V, which, to be honest, I have no idea what it does, but it doesn't really end up mattering for me. And then they just pass their turn. So for me, I top deck the Heatran V. Of course, instead of researching that away, I do want to bench it, but it does suck that I could not find the Chi-Yu. Here I decided to attach the Energy, mostly because I want to be able to retreat into the Chi-Yu, because I can pretty much say for absolute certainty that they cannot KO this Chi-Yu turn 2. They don't have the means to, right? So here I could switch into the Oricorio, or use Oricorio to switch into Chi-Yu, and I also got the Battle VIP Pass, which is huge, which lets me set up the Charcadet and another Heatran V. Now we'll see later in this game that I leave one of the Heatran Vs unevolved, and we'll talk about why once that comes up. But for now, I don't particularly have a reason to use Magma Basin. I don't want to put damage in play, so I don't use Magma Basin, but I do have the Armarouge in my hands, and I have an Ultra Ball to find the Heatran VMAX if I wanted to. I decide, you know what, why not attach the Forest Seal Stone? There's a very, very, very low chance that they run Lost Vacuum, so I'm not too afraid of losing the Forest Seal Stone. Now, they might actually have a line with that they can take to throw some damage into play with Growlithe. They could find a way to discard a Fire Energy with Ultra Ball or something, use Magma Basin to attach on Growlithe, and if they use Ultra Ball, they can find the Arcanine, and they can attach for turn, so they could retreat from the Simisear into the Arcanine EX and swing for the top attack, even though it won't be doing all that much damage. But they could attack with Arcanine EX this turn if they wanted to. I don't really see a reason why they would want to, though, so considering that I don't have a Chi-Yu set up. Here I did end up deciding to discard the Heatran V, but we could always find a second Heatran V, so if we super run it back in, right? So let's see what my opponent does next. So far, they've only played Avery, which drew them 3 cards and made me discard my Heatran V. So it looks like they're just going to use Bursting Power and pass the turn. On my turn, I top deck Magma Basin, which isn't particularly useful. So we'll just evolve into the Armarouge. And this turn wasn't particularly very explosive, but let's see if I can find a way to use Flame Surge this same turn. There is a line that I could take. I could use Research and try to find an energy and then use Magma Basin to throw more energies into play and then use Armarouge to move it up to the Chi-Yu. So let's see if Past Astra was able to put that together. I use Ultra Ball here to evolve into the Heatran VMAX just because, again, it doesn't matter whether your Pokemon's evolved or a basic Chi-Yu will throw energies on it no matter what. And right there, I hover over the card just to make sure. I end up benching Radiant Charizard here because, again, they don't really have a way to knock it out, at least this turn. Luckily for myself, I did find the Fire Energy off the Research, and then, of course, I can throw energy into play. Now, here's a really smart move that I want to quickly talk about. The reason why I threw the energy onto Heatran VMAX is because, although that puts damage into play, I'm able to heal it straight off with my Magma Sync ability. Or, yeah, some ability on my Heatran that will allow me to heal 50 damage, and now I can move the energy onto Chi-Yu, and now there's no damage on the Heatran VMAX, which of course will matter if I need to attack with the Heatran VMAX in the future. Now here I just threw a Force Seal Stone to Chi-Yu EX, not that it matters. I was just trying to get the card out of my hand, to be honest. That way if I do get Iono'd or if I get judged, the card won't be back in the deck and it is thinned out of the deck. So I have a higher chance of finding cards that I do want. Let's take a look at what happens next. I also just had a thought. Earlier I said that I could have found a Heatran V off like a ball search or something if I threw Heatran back into the deck with a Super Rod. I was mixing that up with a different game that I had. It was against Gardevoir EX, which the Heatran V did end up mattering in that matchup because they had a Zacian with a Sky Seal Stone and I didn't want them to KO the VMAX, so I just kept the V the way it is, but that won't matter in this match. So we won't be seeing a second Heatran V, but that's okay. Now here I sense a little bit of weakness in my opponent because they didn't play literally any card this game, so they just hit me for some damage, and then I'm just going to continue charging up my bench Pokemon. That turn was not very explosive for myself either because I didn't draw into any like supporters that would help me find more cards or disrupt my opponent's hand. So just decided to hit them with a Flame Surge, and then if I'm able to get the knockout on the Simisear V, then you know, that's awesome. But I only do 100 damage with this Chi-Yu EX, so not quite there to knock out the Simisear V. Looks like here, they're just going to attach to the Growlithe, and then they might just swing in for 20 damage again. No, they actually decide to research. So they researched away a lot of resources. They researched away one boss, which... Now, I said last time a thing ended up mattering, and it didn't because I just, you know, appended that, but discarding that boss does end up mattering later in the game. So let's see what our opponent is able to cook up. Now, if they had another energy, they could knock out this Chi-Yu right this turn, but that does set them back a little bit. They are now starting to get a little bit more set up, which is kind of scary because the Arcanine EX can just take off But it looks like they will just let us take the KO on the Simisear by just tickling us with 20 damage and then using that bursting power to set up still. So it looks like bursting power will attach energies from the hand into play. Alright, here I draw into an Armarouge, which again, not very useful. My hand is pretty dead at this point, but I am able to continue setting up more Pokemon. And since my hand is a little dead right now, I don't particularly want to throw more energies in play because it doesn't really get me anywhere, so I just decide to fail the energy attachment. And you also saw me attach for turn onto the Oricorio. And the reason why I did that is because if I needed to retreat for whatever reason, right? Like, let's say they hit me with an Escape Rope, I could throw out the Oricorio and then hard retreat by discarding an energy into something like the Charizard or the Heatran VMAX. But here, Chi-Yu takes a knockout, and we get 2 prizes off of that. Those 2 prizes, not very great. It was another Chi-Yu EX and a Fire Energy, but that's okay. At this point, we've got our whole bench set up. We've got the Armarouge that's ready to move energies. We're good. So it looks like this Arcanine EX with the Experience Share was able to get Simisear V's energy, and it is able to attack with a Bright Flame, which does discard 2 energies, but that's okay, because if they attach one here from hand, they are able to just swing it twice in a row with a Bright Flame. Or if I end up swinging into them with an attack, they could just Raging Claws us, and that could do as much damage or more damage. But it looks like they just decide to hit us with Bright Flame for 250, knocking out the Chi-Yu. Let's see what past Astra promotes here. Now, current Astra would choose to promote the Heatran VMAX so that we can inflict burn onto the Arcanine, do a little bit more damage than something like the Armarouge, which, you know, you wouldn't want to attack with anyway. But also, like, attacking with a Radiant Charizard doing 250 damage and not being able to attack next turn does not seem very good. So right here, I was debating which one to promote, but I believe the correct play is to just promote the Heatran VMAX and then take some damage next turn, because we are able to heal off a lot of that damage anyway. So right now, I'm just trying to plan my turns ahead and see what I can do. I attach for turn onto the Radiant Charizard because I know next turn I'm going to be taking some damage. There's a funny little glitch there for when something gets inflicted with a status condition. But there I was setting up the Radiant Charizard because they have taken 2 prizes, so my Radiant Charizard's attack costs 2 less to use, so it takes 3 energy instead of 5. So I believe the plan at this point is to hope that I find Cheryl at some point, because Cheryl is going to be very important to heal the VMAX. I run 2 Cheryls. There's probably one in the deck. I didn't do any deck checking, so I wouldn't really know. But if it's not, then there is a good chance we find it off the prizes, because we do pull 2 prize cards off knocking an EX Pokemon. So let's see what our opponent decides to do. So they get a second Bidoof into play, which eventually will become a Bibarel, or probably will become a Bibarel, and they drew a couple more cards with their current Bibarel. That Growlithe on the bench hopefully will become an EX for my opponent. Looks like they're playing Energy Retrieval to put 2 energy cards, up to 2 energy cards, into their hand. If I were them, I would probably just attach for turn and then also use Magma Basin onto the benched Growlithe, and that sets them up for a second Arcanine EX. play Defiance Man, because it looks like they think that I will be ahead in prizes, which it is a good read. Oh, they go ahead and use Professor's research here. Now, the very interesting thing about that research is, just like the first Professor's research, they did discard a boss's orders. So currently there are 2 boss's orders in their discard pile, and that ends up being a detriment to them later down in the game. So let's see what they can cook up here. They play the Ponyta, which eventually evolves into the Rapidash. Well, it should evolve into the Rapidash. I don't think it sees any play here, unfortunately, but the Rapidash, if you discard a Fire Energy, it increases the damage for your Fire-type Pokemon. So it looks like they did end up using Magma Basin to power up the benched Arcanine EX, bringing the HP down to 260 from 280, because Magma Basin puts 2 damage counters on a Fire Pokemon that attaches energies that way. It looks like they're anticipating me to knock out with the Heatran VMAX, but of course I'm not gonna fall into that trap. I want to heal this Heatran VMAX off as much as possible, and somehow find the Cheryl, which I didn't top deck unfortunately, and I've already gone ahead and used my V-Star power early game. So here I'm just going to move an energy, probably from the Oricorio, onto the Heatran VMAX, only because I have Escape Rope in hand, and my Armarouge can also retreat if I have to promote something to retreat. Now, I promote the Radiant Charizard here, and I just swing in for the KO, because I do 250 damage. That's enough to KO the Arcanine EX, and it puts a single prizer in the active, so that it forces my opponent to have boss's orders to take a 3-prize knockout. Now off the prizes, luckily for me, I draw on the Cheryl, and now I just cross my fingers that they don't have a 3rd boss. Because if they have a 3rd boss, they can gust up the VMAX, and then I cannot take a knockout on that Arcanine because I don't run any damage modifiers in this. So the Radiant Charizard will be 10 damage short of knocking out an Arcanine, and they'll be able to take the final knockout with that prize trade. Now, if they also judge my hand, or disrupt my hand, and I lose the Cheryl, that also puts me in a really, really rough spot. I won't be able to set up another Heatran in time to be able to take an attack like that. So here I'm in a position where it's very critical that my opponent doesn't disrupt me and just takes the KO on the Radiant Charizard. Right now they're setting up the Charcadet, which should turn into the Armarouge. I don't think it sees play in this game, but yeah. Now they play Raihan, and at this point I breathe a huge sigh of relief because it's not boss's orders, so they don't have the KO on the VMAX, which means they got the KO on the Radiant Charizard. But that doesn't end up mattering, because if I can heal off all the damage on this Heatran VMAX, which I can with Cheryl, whether it's in the bench or in the active, I can use Cheryl to heal off all the damage, and then in terms of KOing things, I can just take 2 turns to knock out the Arcanine EX, and I'm very confident in that because they don't have another benched Growlithe, so they don't have another attacker, right? And Radiant Charizard doesn't look like it's in play right now. And if they do have the Radiant Charizard, it ain't in their hand, it seems. So that could be an out for them if they find the Radiant Charizard, but it doesn't look like they are going to reveal that they have a Radiant Charizard or not. So here, again, I'm just hoping that they just knock out the Radiant Charizard and don't find a way to, you know, switch their active out or switch my active out with the Heatran. And at this, I mean, I was in a pretty comfortable position just because, again, they have 2 boss's orders knocked out, and, or not knocked out, but in the discard pile, and they used Raihan for the turn to attach an energy onto Arcanine. Now it looks like they didn't attach to the active, they attached to Ponyta, which I don't know what they're planning there. They might be planning to attack with Rapidash and evolving the Charcadet into Armarouge and maybe attacking with that to clean up, but it looks like I'm in a pretty comfortable position to just finish out the game in around 2 turns. So my opponent takes their final prize card, and I of course promote Heatran VMAX because I have the energy in hand and I have Armarouge. And if I didn't have the energy in hand, I would just attach it to Armarouge and then move all 3 energies from Armarouge up into Heatran VMAX to be able to attack for 180 and do a little bit of burn damage in between turns. I don't exactly know what I was doing at this stage in the game, but I must have been looking away from my screen or something, maybe like texting someone or whatever, but I digress. So we play the Cheryl, we heal off all that damage, and now it's our turn to cook. So we're going to use Fire Off, move 2 energies from my Armarouge onto the Heatran VMAX, and now we're able to attack for 180 and do burn damage, so they'll take an additional 20 damage in between turns. So that is 200 damage onto this Arcanine EX. And now they're sitting at 220. And it looks like the burn will stick around because they flipped tails, so they'll take 20 damage in between. And then at this stage in the game, if they don't attach for turn, or if they don't have a way to retreat, I would be forced to need boss to finish off the game. But even if they promote something, I can take a 2-turn knockout no matter what. So I needed to take the 2-turn knockout on Arcanine EX to take 2 prize cards in 1 turn, or I could just take 2 turns to knock out 2 single prizers and still win that way. But because of that Cheryl at that critical moment, luckily getting the Cheryl off the prize cards, I was able to heal off all the damage from the Heatran VMAX and make a comeback. So it looks like they just decided to pass because they don't see a way out. They could be doing a lot of damage with the Raging Claws, but looks like they just decided to pass. They don't see a way out. I hit them with the Max Heat Burst and take the final 2 prize cards that we need to win the game. And there you go. There we have it. With that, that closes off the video. I hope you enjoyed the Chi-Yu deck coverage. I know people have been covering a lot about Gen-Pao, a lot of Wo-Chien being talked about, but I just wanted to cover I guess a slept-on Pokemon. You know, it's not that good, to be honest, but it is a lot of fun when it gets rolling, and all of the healing makes this deck have that extra sauce, you know, the extra spice factor to it. So yeah, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, share the video with your friends if you're interested in more Pokemon content. I will be trying to make more videos over the summer, and catch my streams over on twitch.tv/OkamiAstra. All the links will be in the description, but I will slowly scroll through the list one last time for anybody that wants to copy the list. I will also leave the deck list in the description as well, so you can just copy it, create a deck, and then click import to try this list out yourself if you want to try it. And if you have any suggestions on how to make this deck a little bit more consistent, or how to make this deck a little bit more fun, or if you have any other ideas for a Chi-Yu EX, drop them in the comments below. I will try to read all of them, and maybe you might catch me trying one of your ideas on stream. So yeah, I hope again that you enjoyed the video, and peace.